But if you're new to checking out our channel, we'd like to do a little recap before we dive into the conversation of the episode. And we'll hit just sort of the high notes from the episode, and then we'll go into the actual discussion, and we'll go from there. So this was episode 31 of the Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, the Souvenir. And this episode opened up with Ame, Suvi, and the fox arriving at Hakea's grove, for lack of a better phrase, and being shocked to discover Badze, the one of the spirits who had swallowed up Ursulon, basically, who's sort of like writhing on the ground, and then Sakuro, the sort of like tree-like spirit who's just like hacking away at this wolf body that's mutilated and seemingly continuously regenerating in this hot spring. And meanwhile, in the distance, Hakea is asleep. The two spirits immediately see Suvi and Ame, and they're like, we got to take care of these people. The fox lets Ame know that Ursulon is inside of Badze. Again, just keeping to the high notes. Sakuro's beating on the wolf. Ame is going to cast a curse on Badze, and it is so effective it actually knocks the spell out from her, for a lack of a better phrase, and Ursulon is released. Brennan describes Ursulon in the Grove of the Well, this other place where he meets the stranger from last episode, sort of like dissipating and cracking, and he returns back to the world of Umora. He gets his sword, immediately begins to attack Sakuro to try to help Heinrul, who's the wolf that's regenerating. And meanwhile, the fox is sent to try to wake up Hakea. And Badze, by the way, is like sending vines and like trying to keep him from making it there. Brennan naturally does a great job acting out the fox, who's sort of like bouncing around and just trying to make it to Hakea. And then finally gets to Hakea and screams, "Wake up!" Hakea wakes up. Meanwhile, Ursulon kills Sakuro, or rather knocks him out, I guess. And we get this amazing scene where Hakea actually, with the spirits slain and defeated, Hakea goes over to the spring, and Brennan describes, I don't know if it wasn't a banishment spell, and maybe it was gate, I think, where she essentially like opens up this portal, like this void, like deep within the earth. And then she pulls out from Sakuro this like seed, almost like this heart of Sakuro, and drops it into this like endless well at the center of the earth, seemingly imprisoning him for eternity. Heinrul regenerates, and his head like crawls back up onto his body and has a very warm moment with Ursulon. It's basically just like, you saved us. You saved me. Thank you. And then meanwhile, they basically tell Hakea like what they know. They're like, hey, your two spirits are working with the man in black. Hakea's response to this is, okay, the spirits have lost their faith in us, sort of implying that like the man in black has now taken things into his own hands. They know that the meeting to decide Ame's fate is only within a handful of hours. So they say goodbye to Hakea, as Hakea is basically like, I need to confer with Grimoire about this. They leave her grove. They go back to the room, basically the not the hovel, the place where where Grandmother Wren had stayed in previous visits to the castle. And it's here that Suvi begins to share this wand of covenant that belonged to Hakea, that's in another spire, seemingly. She tries to perform what she remembers, the tree saying to Hakea in this vision. Brennan mentions that Ursulon, being a wild one, would know that this is Yeola, excuse me, which is basically like the world tree, or like this deep tree of knowledge. And while Suvi can't remember exactly, can't perform exactly what Yuola has said. She knows that essentially, as we know, Hakeya has basically said, "Hey, I've come. I'm at the end of my quest. There's darkness all around. The witches are scattered." Mentions there is a sorcerer across the sea rising up, and basically is asking Yuola for a gift, some kind of thing to bind the witches together. And we're presumably seeing the first moments of when this coven was formed, or really like the boundaries of it was formed. Well, they know, or rather Suvi knows, that if she could go get her music box, she could possibly watch it again and maybe share what Yuola has actually said. So she has the idea. She actually feels a little bit nervous about keeping such a special item so close, like within the castle. She goes back to her quarters. I think it's now she casts Identify on it. And Brennan gives this basically vision of like the archmages of the Citadel and artificers and like all these people being involved in the creation of this item, and that this music box isn't like a random casual item. It's actually what Brennan calls the peak of magic and technology of the Citadel. It's an incredibly important item, and it's basically like the history of this item is essentially the history of discovering how to steal something, how to make copies of something without actually stealing it. So all that to say, Suvi immediately feels like this is too precious to keep in the Citadel or in the castle. So she decides to go out to her retinue, to her fellow mages that are on the airship, and try to be in a little bit more of a safe place. She makes it to the Great Hall on her way out to like the final door, when the fire in the Great Hall goes out, and she hears a voice. She hears a voice of Marara basically saying, "Are you leaving?" She turns to see Marara only inches from her face, and finds out that if she is to leave the Citadel in this moment, if she's to leave the castle in this moment, she will not be allowed re-entry. And she knows how important it is for her to be present at, or at least around, for Ame's meeting. So knowing the risk of maybe losing her chance to get back in, she basically says that, okay, well, that's fine. I was just going to check on my people. I'll just go back to Ursulon and Ame. And she leaves talking about how absolutely, terrifying this witch is. It's a very cool atmospheric scene between the two of them. So she goes back to Ursulon and Ame. She pulls out the music box. It's basically like, hey, I can't explain why I have this, but watch this. They watch the recording of Hakeya meeting the tree, Yuola, and the tree basically says, I will give to you this wand. I'll give you this wand of covenant as a symbol of binding from between you and your other sisters. Go and choose your sisters to be part of this coven. And Hakeya basically says, well, how will I know? Like, how do I know who to pick? And Yuola basically says, the only rule that really matters is to ensure that this covenant continues to exist. You must pick basically an odd number of witches to be part of it. 5, 7, 9, 13, and so on. Interestingly, he skips over the number 11. I have no idea why. But this is, again, presumably the starting steps of when the covenant was formed. And that is where our episode comes to an end, as they sort of finish watching this vision about how the original Coven of Elders was formed. So that was episode 31, The Souvenir of the Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One from Worlds Beyond Number. And again, join our Discord and chat with us a little bit about the show. We always need more people who can talk about it. So